Yeah, my name is Meagan Wesley. I am a client coordinator at the Liberation Institute.
Great. And I'm Adina Ascher, and I'm the clinical director since 2018 at the Liberation Institute in San Francisco. So the Liberation Institute is a grassroots community mental health nonprofit that's been around since 2008. And we serve primarily individual adults. Excuse me. We serve about approximately 500 clients a week. I would say it's about 80% individual adults, about 20% couples, and then we have like a handful of family groups. Kids and youth are pretty rare for us. We have a huge range of client presentations in terms of dually and triply diagnosed folks, personality disorders, mood disorders, some folks who are marginally housed. We also see some folks who have insurance who just don't want to use it for some reason or can't access it for mental health care. We're definitely skewed towards lower SES because we have a pretty significantly lower sliding scale than a lot of other clinics in the Bay. Anything you would want to add, Meagan, to that?
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered it. The only thing I would add is just, since the pandemic, now working with all of California. So really reaching a lot of people.
Yeah.
So primarily it's just going to be individual, couples, group psychotherapy. We offer it weekly. Outside of that, there's also opportunities to do clinical intake and assessment, and then there's like administrative support that will also be required.
Yeah, I concur. There's lots of options for being very creative. The Liberation has a tendency to be very flexible in terms of like working with folks around ideas for groups or adjunct or alternative approaches to therapy. So this is pretty open as long as like it's clinically appropriate. Folks can dabble in all kinds of different stuff with us.
So the client assignment process, let's see, how can I make this quick? So basically people from outside Liberation Institute will reach out to our incoming desk, and from there, we'll set up an intake. So that's going to be, a 50-minute session. They'll fill out some forms and do an assessment. From there, they'll come to me since I'm the client coordinator. I'll kind of look through the assessment, mostly just looking at like presenting problem, if there's any red flags, availability and preferences. If the availability and preferences matches another therapist at the Liberation Institute, I'll go ahead and make the match. And from there, that's when the work would start. Send some forms, reach out and get something scheduled. So on the other side, referrals, that's awesome. If you can bring your own people, bring them in, that's always welcome. The process would pretty much be the same. You would just kind of let us know, hey, I have this person I want to work with. And then we would, just go ahead and get them in our system, set up an intake, and then I'd go ahead and assign them to that clinician who got the referral.
Yeah, and I can just add a couple things. It's not necessary for folks to seek for their own clients, but it's an option. We usually have quite a queue of folks waiting to be assigned. It ebbs and flows throughout the year, but people can do that if they want to. If they're looking for a particular kind of client, if they want to work with adolescents or couples and they put themselves out there, like on Psychology Today or something like that, that's okay with us as well. And then the other thing I was just going to add is that the one kind of client that we're assessing for and ruling out for Liberation Institute are people who are in acute crisis. So folks have to be organized enough to come to weekly psychotherapy in order to work with us. We ask people to carry at least 5 clients a week, to attend at least one group supervision, and to do about 2 hours of associated administrative tasks a week. So At minimum, it's about 8 hours a week, and we ask folks to make at least a 6-month commitment, but people can stay longer. We love it when people stay longer, and there's no upper limit to the number of clients people can see. So it's really just based on somebody's availability and their schedule, and paying attention to like burnout. Of course, we don't want people to burn out. Anything you would add to that, Meagan?
Yeah, no, well said. You can, as long as you have the 5, you're good to go, but there's people who have 15 clients there. So it really just depends on what you're looking for. I mentioned we do require that you attend one of our supervisions. So it's going to be a 2-hour group. We have various groups offered throughout the week, and let's see, individual is also an option. So that would be individual, or we do dyadic, right, too?
So yeah, just to clarify, the Liberation Institute doesn't actually offer individual supervision, mainly just because we can't afford to pay for it, but people do seek individual supervisors. So it's not provided by the Institute. But we have quite a few folks seeing individual supervisors and paying for that out of pocket, or seeing an individual supervisor that was assigned by the school. So I know that CIIS has done that in at times in the past, and we have folks from other programs who have seen supervisors assigned by their school. If allowed, people can also pay out of pocket for that. In some cases, they've paid for one-on-one supervision, and some of the folks on our supervision team also have offered triadic supervision. So either way, we have an agreement that contains BBS language around working with an outside supervisor, so it's pretty easy to make that work. Oh, and another thing I would just add about that is, if the free option to people is just to attend a second group, if they need an additional unit of supervision. Especially nowadays, we don't have a very structured training process. Historically, when we were meeting in person, that's another thing I should just add, is that we're still 100% remote at the Liberation Institute. Historically, when we were meeting in person, we had maybe like once a month-ish, like workshops in person, some type of training or workshop or class. That's gone away. These days we have a much more sort of like self-paced training process. It's a Excel spreadsheet that the supervisors, there's a team of supervisors have all contributed to and put together, that has podcasts and workshops, webinars, YouTube videos, things like that. And then there's like an associated questionnaire. So people can do like an hour-long podcast and fill out a questionnaire that they turn into their supervisor for credit for that training hour. So that's kind of how we've done it. And then people are pursuing CEUs and courses and on their own as well. Of course, we encourage that, but we can't sponsor it. I usually tell people 2 things. One, that we really want people who can work well independently, especially now because we're still remote. People who are good communicators is the other piece. So ability to be on top of emails, reach out with questions. I always also tell folks, you can't ask too many questions. We prefer more communication rather than less. For us, it's hard when people are sort of out there doing their thing and not in touch with us. There's almost always a member of the management team or a member of the supervision team that's available to answer questions. And we want people to reach out. Anything you would add to that, Meagan?
I agree. Just communication's a big one. I mean, we're definitely here to help and support in getting like the hours and whatever kind of comes up, any guidance. So yeah, communication is just going to be the biggest one.
kind of the flip side to what I just said, which is that, you know, the work with us is pretty independent, again, especially now that we're still remote. So being self-motivated and being self-structured. So for people who really need a lot of structure or holding, especially in the beginning, sitting with clients for the very first time, that can be challenging. So I think our site and our program works really well for people who, like, for example, somebody who had like a body work practice, who's used to holding space for clients and scheduling their day, you know, would do really well with the Liberation Institute. Anything else that you can think of, Meagan?
Yeah, in terms of challenges, yeah, one thing that comes up is just, again, like the communication and just letting us know, you know, if you need more clients, if you want more hours. I think it's really common to be intimidated as you're first starting out and wanting to like take your time building up to the hours that you're supposed to be getting a week. But I encourage going ahead and starting with what you need and just jumping right in. Also, maybe asking for an additional client or doing an intake training so that you can get hours to make up for if someone, you know, no shows or cancels, whatever the reason. So I would always say just, you know, communicating what you need and then maybe like getting an additional hour or two coming in a week to make up for that.
I guess I would just say the Liberation Institute has had a long-standing relationship with CIIS, and we've had trainees and associates from every psychology, professional psychology program at the school, and we really enjoy the collaboration. There will be folks will see their interests reflected in the community for sure. And there's lots of space for creativity and flexibility in the provision of services in a way that there may not be in some other clinics. Since we don't take money from contracts, like from the city or grants that come with strings attached, we have a lot of freedom and significantly less paperwork than a lot of other places. We don't require assignment of a diagnosis to a client, even though, of course, it can be valuable to think diagnostically about clients and something that will be on the exam and useful to talk about. It's not a requirement with us. Same thing with doing a care plan or treatment plan. We have the form. It can sometimes be super useful, but it's not a requirement. So there's a lot of freedom and a lot of the time that people spend tracking their time and doing paperwork in other places. You will not have that experience with us. So that's a real plus. And I think it really kind of dovetails nicely with the CIIS approach. Anything you would add, Meagan, to that?
Yeah, just kind of going off the freedom, this really is a place where you do have a lot of independence, which is great practice for just building your own confidence and also figuring out your own style. There's really the opportunity to be yourself and, we're not all doing the same thing. While we do have our policies and whatnot, there's a lot of room to just kind of figure out how you want to show up. So I think it's a really great place if you're just kind of looking for that space.
Yeah, I would add just one other thing in terms of our supervision groups. It's a very diverse group. So there is probably, I would say, maybe 40%, maybe more folks coming from CIIS, but we also have folks from every school in the Bay Area and all over the West Coast, even from Columbia and schools like the Chicago Professional School of Psychology, or I forget exactly what it's called. But anyway, quite a few schools are represented. And so people are working from all kinds of different orientations, and it makes for an extremely dynamic conversation in those groups. And I would say that's probably the number one best aspect of the training that you get at the Liberation Institute, is being in those conversations with folks who work potentially really differently than you do, and hearing that there are multiple ways to approach working with any client presentation. and there's no one right or wrong way